Well, officially, everybody, once again, thanks so much for your patience. Thanks for joining us in person and online, and officially welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon's session, West Coast Rainforest Activist Movements, Current Moments, and Reflections on Decades of Activism. We have quite a number of speakers joining us, so I'm eager to pass the floor to our guests. But first, just to let you know that we are streaming to YouTube Live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, here in Montreal. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. And we make this acknowledgement to not only bring awareness, but also understanding of the history of Indigenous peoples and their territory that we are currently occupying. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community to connect people and exchange ideas, connect people to the knowledge that's brewing here at the university. And we do so by co-creating daily activities such as this one. So it's really our pleasure to have collaborated with the folks organizing this week of activities, today being day 2 of many things happening per day. That's it for me. I'm just so happy you're all here with us. You'll have a chance to jump into the conversation. If you're in the space, give us a sign that you'd like to speak. We'll get a mic to you to ensure that folks on Zoom hear you. And if you're in the Zoom, you're more than welcome to raise a virtual hand and we'll call upon you, or the chat is activated. See how fast I'm trying to speak, Sarah? Over to you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'll just share my screen now. If everyone can see that okay. So welcome to the second event of day 2 in our Research That Matters, Sustainability, Biodiversity, and Justice in a Time of Crisis conference. I'm here with a couple of hats today. I'm the co-director of the Loyola Sustainability Research Center, along with Jim Grant, who's also here, and Rebecca Titler, who's the coordinator and conference organizer extraordinaire. So thank you so much for all the work you've done. I'm also here as an interdisciplinary collaborator and part of the Thinking Aloud group of interdisciplinary artists and scholars who work through Leela Suger's Elastic Spaces group. And so Santiago is here, and there's a number of other people associated with that crew. And this is the second in a series of discussions and conversations, cross-disciplinary conversations, looking at issues around human interactions with the environment and our relationships with science and art and forests and climate change. It's a broad spectrum of things that we look at. We're also looking at colonization and decolonial research and anti-racism research in this context too. And this panel today is one that's very close to my heart. So I'm really excited that we're going to be moving into it. And I'm going to go through, just to let you know, a couple of other exciting things that are happening in this conference this week. First, we have Rasim Khalifa is going to be presenting a keynote address tomorrow in the Fourth Space here from 4 to 5 p.m. also on Zoom. So this is, sorry, let me get rid of that. This is a really exciting looking talk on an important topic. He's done a lot of really important work on diversity and accessibility in science, and he'll be talking about towards a more internationally equitable science. So do come out for that, I encourage you. And just to let you know also that our conference here has a sustainable event certification. And so we would ask, if you're online, that unless you're speaking, that you keep the camera and mic off until you're talking, and not to discourage your participation. You are really welcome to turn on the camera and mic during discussion and when you're speaking. So, but to keep the ecological footprint down of the entire conference. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I just lost my view of the slides. There we go. So we have a lot of sponsors for this conference, and we would like to thank, there's a lot of different departments in the university that have contributed to the making of this conference, and the Dean's Office and the university and the Science College and the Sustainability Action Fund and the NSERC Create Leads program, and of course, Leela Suger and Elastic Spaces. So thank you all to the sponsors of our sustainability conference. And this is our program today. We're going to be talking about Westcoast rainforest activist movements, kind of a retrospective look, looking back over the years of activism right up until now with what's been going on at Fairy Creek. And this, we have a lineup of speakers who are her friends and colleagues and family. It's a really exciting panel for me to be hosting. And Leela, do you want to say any words of introduction here too?
Just we're really excited to be part of the sustainability conference. So thank you.
Yeah, this has been the culmination of a lot of years of interdisciplinary planning and discussions and meetings online during the pandemic. So it's exciting to be having these conversations in Fourth Space now and at this conference. So the reason I say that this topic is close to my heart, this goes back a number of years, but that's me chained to that truck on the road in front of what we were calling Walbrand Valley. If you look at the Walbrand protesters occupy the Ministry of Forests, you'll also see Jesse in that photo, who's going to be talking in a little while. And, you know, here's an image from '91 that's very reminiscent of the same images that we see today with Fairy Creek and the legislature in BC. And in some ways, it seems like things haven't changed that much, but in other ways they have. So that's part of the conversation today, I think, is to look at what's the same and what's different and what progress we've made. And this was also the connection between me and Leela when I started at Concordia. So you can see friends of mine from high school sitting by the Emerald Pool in Walbrand. And this rainforest seems quite far away from downtown Montreal, and yet when I met Leela, she showed me pictures of this same place with her 3D visualization technologies that made it sort of come alive in the third sub-basement of a building at downtown Montreal. And that's kind of amazing and is a way of bringing the forest and kind of a feeling of the forest into the middle of the city in a way that we don't get except through art, I think. So this is part of this conversation as well. And then we've had various interdisciplinary conversations with Elastic Spaces and Thinking Aloud. And Elder Bill Jones has been part of a lot of those conversations too, and a number of the people who are on the panel today. So that's all. I just wanted to say welcome to everybody, and I am going to stop my screen share. Oops, sorry, if I can figure out how to do that. There we go. And I would like to, Bill has joined by phone. All is well? Okay, so I would like to start by introducing Elder Bill Jones from the Pacheedaht First Nation then. He brings just this wealth of expertise in traditional ecological knowledge and living experiences and stories. He's got so many stories about the forests and about working in the forests, and also about the Fairy Creek blockades and what's been going on in rainforest activism on the West Coast. Elder Bill has been to a number of our Zoom meetings and conversations, and I've had the privilege of hearing so many of his stories, and I'm really pleased to have him here today to talk with you. So, well, there you are, Bill. Lovely to see you. Oh, I don't think we can hear you yet.
I'm trying on my iPad.
We can hear you. Yay,
Oh,
welcome.
good. My Mac Mini doesn't work with Zoom very well, but the Mac iPads. I do
Yeah, it's
apologize to everyone in Canada.
no problem. It's perfect. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to pass it over to you to just talk about whatever you would like to talk about in relation to these topics.
Oh my. Well, I'm afraid to have you. Oh, have you? I don't know what to do. Well, there's a small screen. Anyway, yeah, I'll join everyone in the world in Canada down to our meeting here. And I think I had in my life um, an odd experience. Now, I think a woman told me a long time ago, a teacher actually, it said that, well, Bill, your reservation seems to be a microcosm of BC. That's a microcosm of Canada, and and the world is sort of an enclosed, a closed meat place where there's no input anymore. But she said that um, my reservation is simply a part of the Indian Act, and that Canada is a part of the Indian Act of the world, and that we are all on our reservations and limited to where we and what we can do. So I'm um, really at loss to what that. Then I sort of thought it came to me this morning. Maybe I'm a microcosm of this world, and in fact, you know, I sort of up at Fairy Creek, I started realizing I have to relieve and release myself from this world and let me be free again. And I think that's what I found at Fairy Creek is the fact that a lot of us found our own. I was talking about uh, awareness and self realization up there, and I realized that I was taught all my life to not realize myself. And I think the whole system of this Western economic system has done that to me and also to maybe this world, and that we are taught to accept the way things are, the status quo, the economic system that is exploitive, and that we have to exploit and compete. And I think that is a very troubling to me, is because, oh boy, I don't think this world can get by on what it has been doing anymore, much like I myself in my late age can't get by without correcting my systems within my own body and mind and spirit. So I have to really now start working at what I am and what I need to give to this world. And I think we've done that to this island here and to Fairy Creek. We've exploited pretty well all the world around Fairy Creek, and that is the only uh, free and functioning ecosystem left, along with a bit in the Walbrand. So we have to really work at how to find our effectiveness in this world. And myself, I'm going through 3 court actions now that are, well, maybe helpful. One, I'm trying to tell the judge that I'm not a conspirator to disrupt and destroy an economic system. I'm simply trying to save what the economic system is destroying. And so my own dispute with, I guess, the judge and the system that the honor of the crown has entrenched into the system so that it will always make sure that profits are guarded. And I think that is an odd thing that I've started realizing, that it was about when the East India Company in its time and its evolution snuck into the British Empire power structure, and that now that economic influence in the honor of the crown has always been dominant, and that in fact that made it that we wound up with a sort of an uncaring, guilt-ridden world, where actually that's what I was taught in the boarding schools. And so now I'm struggling with the fact that I'm not in the boarding school anymore. The boarding school is dead, and now we're starting to literally and figuratively dig up the skeletons of the boarding schools. Then I realized that this whole world has been a boarding school, and that we are in fact not liberated from our own selves. The economic system has controlled our thought system, and that we can't escape it. Because if we do try to, of all things, be fair with ourselves and fair with our great mother, we are going against the grain and not towing our weight in this world here. And now, with me being in a retirement home of all things, I'm starting to realize that we have to assert ourselves and turn this around to help this world. And I think I better leave that briefly for now, because I don't want to use up too much time. I think I better leave it now, okay?
Thank you so much, Bill. What we'll do is I'll invite each of the panelists to speak. So Bill just went. Thank you so much, Bill, for your words of wisdom and for telling us about the situation at Fairy Creek and being charged with conspiracy by Teal Jones. And maybe next we could, Kathy, would you be, if we could spotlight Kathy Code. Welcome. Kathy Code has been an avid environmentalist for many years with a deep interest in climate change and regenerative agriculture, ecoforestry, environmental economics, and grassroots activism. She obtained her master's in environment and management from Royal Roads University. She's on the board of Wildwood and has worked with the Ecoforestry Institute to keep that property in the public domain. And she's been involved in the Fairy Creek grassroots activist movement to save that intact piece of old growth forest with the Rainforest Flying Squad. So thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. We really appreciate having you here today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I thank you, Bill, for your words. No matter how many times I hear you, you always come through with some new messaging and some new ways of looking at things. So I do really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I was involved with Fairy Creek right from the beginning. I was asked to come in and set up the legal team. So I was able to find the lawyers, find the money, and I started doing research. I mean, in the very beginning, it was a group of hikers who crested the ridge and saw this magnificent forest before them and vowed that they would protect it forever. So the primary goal at that time was to save the old growth. When I started doing the research and looking into the agreements related to the Pacheedaht First Nations, I was appalled to find that they were so far along in terms of the treaty process, and also that the forest revenue sharing agreement that the government had signed with them gave them so very little money in return for basically clear cutting and ravaging their unceded territories. So as we went along in Fairy Creek, we discovered all of these underlying issues that suddenly became ours to deal with. And I have to say that the people at Fairy Creek, well, answered the call. Not only did they come to the mountain and set up camps and try to protect the old growth, but we all came to realize that we needed to learn of the colonial history and to decolonize ourselves. And I have to say that I'm very proud of the work that we did in partnership then with the Indigenous peoples who also came to the mountain from far away, from Ontario, from all over BC, from Saskatchewan, from Manitoba, even the Lakota from the States, we had representation there as well. So it turned into a very significant event then, where communities, Indigenous people, and settlers, sort of tried to hammer out their understanding of what we needed to do and what we needed to do to save the old growth trees together, what that meant for us and for the Indigenous people in terms of their culture and heritage, and what it means for us in terms of climate change and in saving the biodiversity and the very lungs of the province. So while we're not on the mountain anymore, we lasted a long time, in view of the militarized police squad that they sent after us with tracking dogs and helicopters and squad members who were, interested in inflicting pain and pepper spray. It was really horrendous, and I have to applaud the Fairy Creek defenders who withstood that kind of torment and abuse, and especially the Indigenous people who were often selected for particular abuse on top of everything. So we quickly came to realize that, not only was our government not going to come in and protect the public interest, but the courts had no power. Their role was strictly to protect the economic interests of the corporations, in this case, Teal Jones, that had a legitimate contract with government, an approved contract, and therefore they couldn't break it. So as time went on, though, I think that some of the justices in the system began to see what the problem was, that the government was unwilling to take up its mandate of the public interest, that we were acting as volunteers and out of altruism and out of wanting to conserve for our generations and generations to come the biodiversity of our planet. We've had some, one in particular, Justice Thompson, who with every person that he sentences, and he has to sentence them because they've admitted to being in tripods and sleeping dragons, when he sentences them to community work, he also takes care to outline what people of good character they are, that they are people of integrity, and that we're not the thugs and eco-terrorists that industry and government would have you believe. So I think the Fairy Creek experience has, well, I hope someday that behavioral scientists come along and study it, because it was an amazing experience, and it still is an amazing experience. I mean, there's no hierarchy. People come to the movement, they fit themselves in wherever they think that help is needed. We're adaptive, we're resourceful, and we've done amazing things with the donations and the goodwill of people who have supported us. So even though we're not on the mountain anymore, we're still a very strong presence. And as you can witness by the rally on February 25th, where at least 2,000 people showed up on the streets of Victoria to march from Centennial Square up to the legislative buildings, representing the forest, representing the creatures of the forest and of the oceans, and all the things that make up biodiversity of which we're a part. And then to have somebody like Neil Young show up as a surprise guest at that event was pretty amazing. So we're still a strong force, and we will still, come up with events and rallies and letter writing campaigns, and we're a strong presence in the communities. First Nations, I think, have been empowered to stand up for their lands. So I think we've had a lot of good consequences, and I think we are still on the forefront, especially in terms of the legal actions that are coming forth. I can't talk about some of those now at this point in time, but as Bill said, there's 15 of us that are being charged with conspiracy by Teal Cedar. So it will be interesting to see the evidence that they come up with in terms of proving that. So we're still waiting to be served and still waiting to hear the exact charge. So anyway, so that's where we're kind of at the moment. So I will hand it over to somebody else now. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I think we'll turn now to Rainbow Eyes. Rainbow Eyes is an Indigenous activist from the traditional territory of Knight Inlet. She's been working as a trained land guardian for her nation, protecting some of the last old growth on Vancouver Island, Fairy Creek. And hi, welcome. She's a member of the Rainforest Flying Squad, and I was so pleased to meet Rainbow Eyes at the COP15 meetings, the Biodiversity Summit in December, when she, along with Grandma Losa and a whole group of activists, brought this amazing section of 700-year-old Douglas fir into the conference, and beautifully disrupted the conference with this cookie of Douglas fir that blew everyone's minds as they, from all over the world, as they came and saw this piece of the Westcoast ancient rainforest. So it was, oh, I think you're muted still, Rainbow Eyes.
Oh, that's okay. I wasn't really saying anything.
Well, welcome, and thank you so much for participating today in the panel. I will hand it over to you, and if you want to share your screen or just talk as you like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for the invite. We're so happy to be here. Hi, Bill. It's so good to see you and hear you. I agree, Sarah. Whenever we hear Elder Bill speak, it's so beautiful. I have Glenn here as well.
Hi, Glenn.
Yeah. And we're actually in the Yukon. So we've been here for a week. We're calling from the territories of the Kwanlin Dan in Whitehorse. And we traveled up to Dawson City, the beautiful territories of the Han people. And yesterday we just went to Haines Junction, the territories of the Champagne and Ajax First People. And it's been so incredible, this trip. because we came up here to connect about digital justice, as well as share the movie Rematriation, which is about Fairy Creek. And I hope everybody gets to see it because it's a powerful movie with Elder Bill, Grandma Losa, Roy Vickers, all about the old growth and the connection to the culture. And it's been so beautiful seeing the territory up here, because for as far as you can see, you don't see a clear cut, and you see the horizon is far away, and it's so pristine and so pure. And I feel like it's a place where we all can come and connect and feel what it's supposed to be like. And I just want to follow what Elder Bill said about, the fact that we're all trapped, and we don't realize it. We never realized it until we went out to Fairy Creek and we felt what true living really was in a community where we woke up every single day with so much passion and fire to work together to save Mother Earth. Nobody was getting paid, and everybody worked harder than we've ever worked in our life, because we were working for a common cause, and we were working for Mother Earth. Bill. So Elder Bill said it. I mean, I'm going to share it. I share Elder Bill's quotes all the time. He's like, the whole world is a boarding school now. And this is what we're learning, because in the forest, we felt freedom and community. And it was like seeing a new color, living this kind of way. So if anybody ever has the opportunity to go into a forest or start a community in the forest, for any reason, we must do it. The forest is the spirit school, and it's how we unlearn the social structures. Like Kathy Code was saying, it's so cool to see Kathy as well. Kathy, you're so beautiful in Rematriation. You speak so beautifully. So yeah, we get to show this movie everywhere we go, and it's just been amazing. So I just want to also share a little bit. I didn't do my introduction to myself. I was too excited about Elder Bill, but Gela Kesla, Nuko Rainbow Eyes, Nuko Gwiksi Salis is my traditional name. I'm a member of the Danakdao Awitlala First Nation, and our traditional territory is Knight Inlet. So it's northern Vancouver Island and into the inland in Knight Inlet. And my family is the Glendales on my grandfather's side through my mother. And my grandfather was the hereditary chief of our nation. He's passed, and my grandmother is Anne Glendale. And on my father's side, my grandfather was Ken Davidson from Scotland, and my grandmother was Tinny Davidson from Britain. And I just like to share that traditionally, we're told that our ancestors never introduced themselves by name. We introduced ourselves by our family and where we come from. And that's an important message, because we are our family and we are who we come from. So that was important. When we spoke to elders, we introduced our ancestors first, and our parents and our grandparents. And my family's always been really close to the animals and nature. As all First Peoples, nothing special about my family, but we have always had a special connection to the orcas, to the mahinu. It is the name in Kwakwala. When my great-grandfather passed away, we're told that the orcas came into the bay at our village of Tazesnukome on Harbledown Island. And So traditionally, we put the bodies of our past loved ones into cedar boxes, and we put them up into trees. And on this day, the orcas came in to acknowledge the passing of our great-grandfather. When my grandfather passed away, we're a Gleetna-making family, which is an ooligan fish. It's a candlefish. The river at the head of Night Inlet, the Clini River, it flooded. And my grandfather always took care of the river and made sure nobody ever littered in the old camp that we have there or threw pop bottles into the river. So it was known he did this all of his older years. He made sure nobody littered. So as a sign of respect, you could call it coincidence, but on the day he died, the river flooded. And this is just some of the instances that we have where the orca and nature acknowledged the passing or big events happening in a family's life. And I think it's really important to share this because just like what we found at Fairy Creek, it wasn't special, but it was normal. And if we can reconnect to nature and honor it our whole lives, nature will come to acknowledge us. The mammals will start talking to us. We'll understand the birds again. My grandfather always talked about the birds singing what the weather was going to do and weather changes. And this was normal. It was normal. And I think once we reconnect to nature and we start working every day for nature and Mother Earth, we can grow this connection again, which is not special. Not only some people will have it, it will be everybody. And that's something that we had out in the forest. It was coincidences. It was called creator time. Things lined up in the forest on a different level, like we never saw out in the real world. And it happened every single day at Fairy Creek where things lined up, and it was too much to be a coincidence. So with Grandmalosa, we spoke to a grandmother in Peru, and she held a ceremony for the mountains at Fairy Creek because a lot of the negative energy, because of the RCMP abuse that happened, were held in the mountains. So she held a ceremony for the mountains to release the negative energy from all of the trauma that happened there because of the RCMP abuse. And this grandmother said, we must bring the trees back into the center of everything we do again. Everything we do again. Elder Bill always says this. He always says the trees are our culture. They are all of our culture, every single one of us. We cannot continue to clear cut trees and destroy the biodiversity. We're cutting down our culture. We're cutting down our connection to spirit and our ancestors. And it's something that is so important. And once we bring the trees back into the center of everything we do and acknowledge them and honor them, we will start to bring back this old culture. And so right now we're planning a summit for the trees to bring people together, to really just talk about the trees. And I'll just go into a little bit about the court. So we went into the center of the trees. We followed the call of the forest, which we heard through our heart. And nobody really thought about it that we would go right into the middle of the court system and the colonial court system. So it was Canada's largest act of civil disobedience with over 1,000 arrests. People have been fined $2,500 and people have gone to jail for 10 days for standing up for the last of the old growth and heeding Elder Bill's call to come and protect his traditional hunting and fishing territory on the Pachidat and Diridat First Nation. So what we're doing now is we're trying to braid Indigenous laws and our natural laws into the colonial court system. And the Crown hates this. The colonial court system does not like this. So myself, I had 5 arrests, 5 nights in jail. And when I went to court last, I had 5 Crown prosecutors against me and my lawyer, because they're going to try everything they can to make sure that we do not use Indigenous and natural laws to break through their colonial laws. But we have such a high chance because they brought 5 Crown prosecutors. It shows that they're scared. It shows that they're worried. So now I'm working with the Green Party. Just one more thing. The Green Party within the IPAC, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle. And through this, we're going to try to introduce new law, legislation, policy for the next 7 generations. And this is something that we learned from different women at COP15, Latin American women that I met, that I connected with like soul sisters. All around the world, the Indigenous people know, how do we change this system? We get in and we change the policy. Bolivia just did this. They introduced new law, a document protecting Mother Earth and the destruction of pieces of Mother Earth. So they just passed this law. It's in their law now in Bolivia, that the protection of Mother Earth. And it's crazy that Canada, that we don't have this. So we're doing this. Green Party is an advocate for the Indigenous voice. They have a lot to learn. It's a colonial system, but we're also working with the Congress of Aboriginal People. And that's also how we got up to the Yukon. So yeah, thank you, Congress. They represent off-reserve natives, which is 80% of the population. The Assembly of First Nations represents on-reserve natives, but it's such a small percentage. So the Indigenous people of Canada are really waking up, not waking up, coming together and figuring out how to braid into the colonial system and bring our voice, bring our natural laws, which are overarching. It's an overarching umbrella on top of the colonial laws. And this is what we're trying to show the system. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm not sure how much time I get, but thank you so much. Thank you again, Sarah. I'm so grateful to be here. Yeah, love you.
Thank you so much, Rainbow Eyes, for those really powerful words. And we have 3 more presenters, and then we'll open it up for conversation and questions for everyone. So thank you so much. Next, I'd like to ask Rita Wong to speak. Rita Wong is from the Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver, and investigates the relationships between contemporary poetics, water justice, ecology, and decolonization. She's co-edited an anthology with Dorothy Christian entitled Downstream Reimagining Water, and is the recipient of the Dorothy Livesey Poetry Prize and the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop Emerging Writer Award. She has a really long list of wonderful projects that she has done and is working on, and I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you so much, Rita, for coming and presenting. And if you'd like to share your screen or just speak as you like, thank you.
Sure. I will share my screen. Can everybody see this? Let me see, wait a minute. Maybe, sorry, I'll try it this way. There. How's that?
Yeah, it looks great. We can see it perfectly.
Okay, good. Thank you, Elder Jones and Rainbow Eyes and Sarah and Kathy. So good to hear all of your voices. And yeah, I resonate with so much of what you're saying. And Rainbow Eyes, I just, your stamina through all of this has been a real inspiration. I'm speaking today from unceded Coast Salish lands, also known as Vancouver, the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And one of my dear mentors who's passed into the spirit world, Lee Miracle, said very often that water owns itself. And we have a relationship with the water that makes the earth livable for us. And I wanted to just bring some of that into the conversation today. Lee also said that when we live on Coast Salish lands, we have responsibilities to uphold Coast Salish laws. And I believe that's also the case on Pachadat territory, Didadat territory, and other territories, Indigenous territories across Turtle Island, that those Indigenous laws preceded these colonial laws, and they connect us to the land and the earth in a way that we really need to remember and honor. So this is one of the first photographs I took up in Fairy Creek in May in 2021, when I first went up to visit. And I went because of the invitation of elders like Grandma Losa and Elder Bill Jones. Otherwise, I do not think I would have gone. So I just want to acknowledge how important it is to listen to our elders. And I think about our elders, both in terms of our human elders, but also these trees as elders, right? These 1,000-year-old incredible beings. And these trees, we don't always think about it, but they're also full of water, right? Water, Erica Gies wrote a book called Water Always Wins. And I think what we see at the moment is also a contestation of power. And I think water always wins in the long term. So when we're thinking about water, I just want to acknowledge that water has its own agenda, a life of its own, as Lee says, it owns itself. And we're lucky to be on a planet that's made livable by the gifts of the water. So Gies says, water finds its chosen path through a landscape, molding it and being directed in turn. It has relationships with rocks and soil, plants and animals, from microbes to mammals like beavers and humans. Today, water is revealing its true nature increasingly often, as climate change brings more frequent and severe droughts and floods. To reduce the impacts of these phenomena, water detectives are now asking a crucial question: what does the water want? And, you know, slow water, I think, is what life needs, and what water does beautifully in forests and natural landscapes. These are some images I took from up at River Camp before it was taken down by the RCMP. Cutting these forests down basically speeds up water's movement and decreases the Earth's ability to sustain life. So if you think about the trees and ourselves, right, as basically water beings, how we hold water and how we're part of the hydrological cycle, not separate from it. When the BC has been going through forest fires and heat domes in the summer, and in June 2021, at the end of June, when Lytton burned down in the middle of the heat dome, my partner was up at Fairy Creek, and at Fairy Creek, in the middle of all those big old rainforest trees, he didn't feel the heat. He felt like incredibly comfortable at this time when most of the province was burning and dry and scary. So those trees, I mean, I think they have what folks might say intrinsic value. They are sacred. They have just a perfect right to be. But functionally, they're also key in the work against climate crisis. And this I think of the climate crisis as a crisis brought about by 500 years of colonization. It's nothing new, that this disaster has been a long way in the making, but we're on the edges of potentially tipping or collapsing. And so to protect this land, I think, is so crucial. And, you know, for that reason, and also for the trees and the spirit themselves, people were drawn, like people from all four directions, as people have been saying, were drawn to show up at Fairy Creek and to just be there. So I think our work is to remember that we're part of the land, part of the hydrological cycle, that its health is our health, and we have this inherent responsibility to reciprocate. So some of the moments from up my time when I was visiting Fairy Creek from Vancouver, I wrote about it for the Social Justice Center blog, the Georgia Strait, Rabble, the Tyee. And I wanted to just share a small memory of when I first arrived in May. I arrived expecting to get arrested, but I also arrived in the middle of this incredible storm. It was raining, it was windy, our tent flooded, like it was heavy, heavy rain. And so in the morning, we were all getting ready to go up to the road and block it. And what did we find? We found 3 large trees that had fallen in the storm, and they effectively blocked the road for us. So that day, at least, we didn't have to get arrested. And the trees, it felt, like Rainbow's Eyes was saying, that it was more than a coincidence. It felt like many times that things lined up. And these trees that gave up their life in that storm, it really felt like to all of us on the ground that they were sending us a message, you're on the right track, keep going. Thank you for your work. And, here is our response to the work that you are doing. So like just the rain, the weather, the forests, the trees, all of it, there's an incredible energy up there that is really hard to describe. It just has to be felt and nourished, I guess, or cherished. In terms of the value of the forest, I think it is priceless. I think it is sacred. It is irreplaceable. There have also been attempts to try to find ways to stop the cutting through financial means, fundraisers like this one and others, in terms of trying to compensate the Pacheedaht Band Council and the other First Nations for the loss of revenue through the logging or stopping the logging, I think is really important, because the Indigenous peoples should not pay the price for protecting the forest. This is something that is up to the colonial governments to cover the cost of. And if the colonial governments are failing us, which they have been, then it's up to the people to find a way. So in July, I wrote a little bit about this as well. And one of the things that Elder Jones has said, that what people are protecting is not only the forest itself, but also our sensitivity to the forest, our own humanity. And I feel that very strongly. There's an Aboriginal elder, Lila Watson, who said famously that if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And that sense of solidarity, I think, is really important. And that's what I felt and experienced very deeply at Fairy Creek. So it wasn't like a bunch of saviors, parachuting in and out, but it was a slow process of building relationship, of trying to just do what needs to be done and do it together, and to come together in the best way we possibly could. There's always going to be challenges and conflicts when you get together, a large group of people. It's inevitable, I think, in a colonial divide and conquer society. But I think people did their best to work through that, and are still working through it, as people, for example, are going through the courts, which is an incredibly arduous and tedious process. I also, in Vancouver, had been arrested up at Burnaby Mountain for blocking the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and had spent 18 days in jail previous to showing up at Fairy Creek. And, the connections across different ecologies or different places, I think, are what drive people to make these connections with each other. And so, as has already been mentioned, the incredible spontaneous organizing that happened on the ground was heavily, heavily repressed and violently repressed by the RCMP, its community industry response group. APTN News has done a really deep dive into the lack of transparency around the RCMP on this. And I think this is something that we all need to hold so-called Canada accountable for. The expenses of what people have been, just wasting on enforcement through the RCMP CERG. This is from an article in the CBC. Basically, we see that Canada and BC have spent roughly $4 million on violently repressing land defenders at Trans Mountain, about 28 million on Coastal GasLink, and about 19 million on people up at Fairy Creek. And this is the figure as of July in last year. So the numbers have only gone up since then. So just to realize, like, to waste $50 million, and when you think about all that money could have been spent on to protect the lands that we're trying so hard to protect, it is just, it is criminal in my opinion. So when we're thinking about water, I think we need to think about how, you know, all of this work that's being done by colonial forces is actually making it less hospitable to the water, less hospitable to life, less hospitable to biodiversity, all of it. And so, you know, I think we all know this, or we wouldn't necessarily be in this room talking, but I just, for people who are new to this or thinking about this, it's really important that this stop. There have been calls to, for example, defund or, you know, just stop the surge. And I encourage people to get on board with that. So the third piece that I wanted to mention briefly was on August the 9th, 2021. That was the date that the RCMP raided headquarters, or HQ. That was also the same date that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a code red warning regarding climate. And so, you know, all of this is happening at the same time. People are responding to the destruction. This is Red Dress, which was up there. Incredibly creative, loving, generous people up at Fairy Creek, and doing just incredible work in the face of massive violence and clear cuts like this. So, you know, APTN has uncovered allegations against the RCMP that include intimidation, torture, brutality, harassment, racism, theft, destruction of property, arbitrary detention, inhumanity, lying, and deceit. And I think, you know, just to think about, for me, one of the lessons of water, as Bruce Lee, the martial artist, said, be water. Water teaches us to pay attention to whatever we need to be paying attention to, and to not be just, you know, valuing the sacredness of water, of course, but also holding our governments and our societies accountable. Water goes where it's needed, and it is really needed to have scrutiny on these violent police forces that are just basically enforcing clear cuts like this one. When I was up at Fairy Creek during the raid, I happened to be caught outside the HQ instead of in it. And when we were finally allowed back into HQ a few days later, I think it was April 14th, what I found and what I personally witnessed was just that the RCMP were the ones that had wrecked and destroyed a lot of property, people's things. We were told we could come in and gather our belongings, but they had just made a mess of a lot of things and just ruined a lot of people's belongings, you know, smashed cars, just ripped through and vandalized people's property. So, you know, the police, there's no accountability right now. And, you know, this is something that, you know, cannot be ignored. The people who've done this need to be held accountable for it. But I'll close or wrap it up by just saying that, you know, what is stronger than all that violence and that show of intimidation for me is the power of the land itself. The creeks that keep flowing. This is a photo I took in, I think it was October, after the raids, after the clear cuts. There's so much up at Fairy Creek, Adaites, that's worth protecting still. And I'm really heartened by seeing how people continue to gather in all the ways that we can and to be creative about the work that we do. It comes from a really deep place of love, of care, of long-term commitment to life. So I just wanted to, close with this image of what is still worth protecting and what is still nourishing us as we speak in this room today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rita, for those beautiful words. That was really lovely. And yeah, we really appreciate you being here. Next, I'd like to ask Jessie Demers to present. Jessie is a longtime friend. We were members of the Environmental Youth Alliance together as teenagers, and it's really exciting to be here together in cyberspace, but it's really lovely to have you, Jessie. Thank you so much for coming. Jessie's an artist, an independent curator, an arts administrator, educator, and community organizer. She has done all sorts of amazing projects, but most recently, she's been a member of the Rainforest Flying Squad, but also has been the curator for the Eden Grove Artist in Residence program, in which they brought 12 artists to the front lines and into the forest. And so over to you, Jessie, if you want to share your screen or talk as you like.
Yeah, I'll share it in just a sec. Yeah, thank you so much. This is so exciting and just such a full circle moment. Being here with you and with Nancy, and I just feel so inspired by what everybody has said so far, and we share a lot of the same perspectives. I'm coming to you from Lekwungen territory, the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations in Victoria, BC, and this is where I grew up. And I will share my screen in a moment. I have a ton of images, but I'm going to time myself. I think I have about 7 seconds per image or something. As a visual artist, yeah, that's kind of, that can happen. So I'm just going to share my screen and tell some stories. So this first image, it has sound. I don't know if you can hear it. This is a recording of Eden Grove, actually, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. So my first experience being in an old growth forest, I was about 16 years old, and I went up trail building with the Western Canada Wilderness Committee. And like everyone else has said, it changes your perspective when you're in these places and you see the way that life kind of should be when it's intact over centuries. And it alters your perception of yourself, your place in nature, the arc of time, where you fit into it. And it just allows you to question a lot of things that society tells you, and the values, and economic structures that you've kind of been enculturated with. So that was really pivotal for me as a young person. And after that, I got together with other youth, and we made our own chapter of the Environmental Youth Alliance and started doing all sorts of stuff. It was really neat to see Sarah's image of our office occupation. You can't even do that now because all the offices are closed. It's very different now. So I'll talk a bit about some of those comparisons between then and now, but also show you a lot of art. So this is Cahex, Walburn Valley Falls, and there's these beautiful karst rock formations that filter the water and produce this incredible clear water and really unique and endangered ecosystems. And what was maybe equally impactful is seeing the scale of destruction when you're immersed in a place like that, and then you come out and you're encountered with these massive clear cuts. When you go back now, a lot of it has quote unquote greened over, as I've heard foresters say. But it's just really heartbreaking and shocking. And then also, this is not a good picture, but seeing second growth forests and as tree plantations, and really understanding what that means and how what forestry is and how it operates was very eye-opening. So I just kept going back and back to be in these places and eventually come to defend them. So this is just kind of a map showing original old growth, before colonization, before all this destruction. And then see the dark green is the productive, big tree old growth. And then this is, there's less than 3% remaining. So it's very urgent, and we're in a climate crisis, and we need to stop doing this. Right now, the forests in BC actually emit more carbon than they sequester overall because of forest fires, pine beetle, and clear cutting. So we need to save what's left for that reason and so many others. So here's a photo from back in the day of some of my friends from a high school trip that I organized at Anderson Lake. And this is the original poster that was created by hand and pinned up on, telephone poles back in 1991, encouraging people to come out and to protect the Walbrand Valley. And amazingly, it worked. There was not as many people that came out to Fairy Creek, but a very small and determined group of people that blockaded for, I think it was about 76 days or something. And this is the bridge before the road there was a road that was eventually punched through and a couple of small clear cuts, but in the end, a large chunk of the forest was protected. There were some extreme tactics. These are prints, photos from the time that were scanned by a friend and sent to me. Some of these tactics were used at Fairy Creek. This is the Cantilever Canyon. There's a car on the road weighted down with rocks, and a fellow who I think he eventually became a lawyer, apparently, he went out on the platform. And I don't know if I can move this aside. Yeah, it's interesting seeing some of the photos now, and you realize just the difference between what was happening at, Walbrand and Clayoquot Sound and the kind of enforcement that was happening at Fairy Creek. So you can see the media is there. There's someone with a camera right there. The people who are standing to the side aren't going to get arrested. It's only the people that are lying down on the road. And, they weren't beaten. There was no broken bones, tear gas. There was no CIRG, Community Industry Response Group, this, paramilitary section of the RCMP that's brought in to protect the interests of industry. So I think going into, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when we kind of created the group, the Rainforest Flying Squad that I became part of, those of us that have been part of the original War in the Woods thought it would be similar. We kind of told people, like, you'll have lots of warning, they'll read the injunction, because that was our lived experience. And what we should have known from looking at what was happening in some other parts of BC, what was to come. Here's some other platforms and things. So after all of that direct action, a big chunk, the lower Walbrand was protected and became part of the Camano-Walbrand Provincial Park, but still there's a large area that's sort of unprotected, including the area where the main blockades were happening. And right now there's like a temporary deferral, and we're still hoping that the rest of the Walbrand will be protected. So let's see here. After Walbrand became Clayoquot Sound, this is actually an art piece. Let's see if I can hide this, minimize this. By Ian Wallace, where he was there and he was taking photos of the blockades at Clayoquot Sound, and I inadvertently became part of it. I just thought it was kind of funny and I have to show that. So yeah, artists were there, during Clayoquot Sound. There was artists came up, when Carmana Valley was being protected, and there was a book created of art. So artists have been drawn to these movements, as well as people from all walks of life. So I went away from the island for many years. I came back and joined the Friends of Carmana-Walbrand, who have been active since then, building trails into the unprotected area so people can come and see it, and creating events like this, the Convergence. That's where I met Elder Bill Jones and some other Pachidat Nation members. This is at the ribbon cutting of the Harriet Nahani Memorial Trail. And Harriet Nahani was a Pachidat land protector. Here's Elder Bill cutting the tape for the Emerald Loop with now Green MP Adam Olson. So fast forward to 2020, and right at the very ridge of Fairy Creek. This is Fairy Creek we're looking at right here, the last intact old growth valley on southern Vancouver Island. And some of us were tipped off that a road was going to be punched through over the ridge. And so a blockade was set up. And I made August 9th red on the previous blockade of Clayoquot Sound because it's a significant date. It just happened to be, it's a coincidence that that the blockade was set up at Fairy Creek on August 9th as well. And that date comes up again. I wish I could see you all again, but oh my gosh, I'm almost done. That's crazy. Okay, I'm gonna blast through Fairy Creek. Here's the Elder Bill. Hereditary Chief Victor Peter, and some very creative actions that happened. But as we've said, the presence of the CIRG just changed everything. So I was trying to find my place in all of this. There's a lot of unity as well, and community that was created. And I was trying to figure out, where do I fit in the community? What skills do I have to offer? And there's a camp set up at Eden Grove that was had sustained itself for a while. There's a wonderful community there and access to old growth. And it was an area where there hadn't been heavy police presence at that point. So, and it's just beside Big Lonely Doug, which is an area where tourists come. This is an incredible photograph of Big Lonely Doug. So I was given a tent and I set up an artist residence close to Eden Grove. Here's an artist rendering of the camp at Eden. And my artist tent was just a little ways off, a little bit separate, because we were trying to create a space that was a bit separate from the blockades, at the beginning, thinking that maybe we wouldn't be arrested and we could stay and be witnesses. So yeah, I was inspired by what other artists kind of residencies that have been created like this in the past. So here's the tent, and artists work outside during the day and in the tent in the evening. So there are 12 artists that came, Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists, and some of them still continue to go out there. Eventually we did pack up the tent before enforcement started, because I didn't want everything to be stolen and I wanted to keep the artists safe, but it was very kind of hit and miss. So we were trying to sort of function at this intersection between art, activism, ecology, and then learning from Pachidat, having that decolonial lens, and having Indigenous artists as part of it to share their cultural and spiritual relationship with these forests. Jeremy Herndl was the first. Is it okay that I'm still going, or should I cut it off?
Yeah, tell us about the artist residency.
Okay. Sorry,
sometimes
getting
your
to this
sound
so late.
sometimes your sound cuts out. I don't know if you're
Okay,
able to,
maybe I should talk slower.
or talk a little more loudly if you can.
Okay, yeah, I'll turn my volume up a bit. Jeremy Herndl was the first artist. He created a series of tree portraits in oil paint, and a lot of people would just come across him. He ended up in a few different videos and news articles just from people coming across him in the forest. Kyle Sherman was the second artist, and here he is with one of his paintings in progress. So me and Kyle were there, and Jeremy one day when we got served the injunction. That was the beginning, and we had a very interesting conversation with, it was actually Teal Jones that came to deliver the injunction instead of the RCMP, which was bizarre. But we said, we're going to be off to the side, we're not blocking anything. We're not blockaders, we're artists. And, you know, so they said, you shouldn't paint in such a contentious area. That's exactly why we were there, was to witness and share about what was happening and provide a different perspective. And we also wanted to, yeah, it can, you know, get very heated and what's the word I'm looking for? Divisive in these environments. And so I wanted to have a space where people can ask questions and share different perspectives. And, you know, no matter if you are an RCMP member or a blockader or a tourist, when you look at art, you have an experience. So it's a point of accessibility. And I wanted to, yeah, create a space and see what was possible. So here's some of the artists: Paul Waltz, Cal Sherman, and Linda, I'm forgetting her name right now, Gilday, who was there as an assistant to Paul. Legally Doug. Trying to change slides. Here we go. Randy Cook came. This is a photo of him on his territory with some of his masks, and he's a loud and incredibly inspiring advocate, and he's created the Awinakiola collective of artists and ecologists since Eden Grove, and they're doing incredible things, so please check them out. For some reason it's just very slow to advance. I am trying to go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Heather Kai Smith came and documented some of the community and social aspect of what was happening about Eden Camp and some of the activism. She produced a series of drawings. And, oh geez, it's going, sorry, it's not advancing properly. I wanted to show you a community art project that Connie Michelle Morey did, where she invited people to come and do visible mending on socks, and she made a display in the forest. But I can't seem to go back to that slide. Here's, once the hard blockade started at Eden Grove, they dragged a school bus across the road, and Kyle painted Last Stand on it. It became an art piece, a photograph that another artist in our group, Mike Andrew McLean, created. The bus was eventually removed, but no logging has happened in the area. And it's not letting me advance. I'm just going to try and go off of full screen, because maybe that's part of the problem.
Maybe if it's stuck, Jesse, we should see if we can come back to scroll through. I don't know if yeah, do you want, if you have a trick to get it?
I don't know, I'm trying to hit escape. I'm going forward, but it's a little, I could stop my screen share. I don't know. Escape and on to the next slide. Yeah, it's not really, oh, there we go. The bus is removed, and Kyle made a painting of the bus, which was then also removed. So there's all forms of resistance going on, and creative resistance. But yeah, I wish I could just advance these better, because I want to show you more art, and I don't want it to go so slowly. It seems like it's just taking a long time. I'm not sure why.
We're losing the sound for you as well.
Oh.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out why it's not advancing, or it goes really slow and then suddenly jumps ahead. That's too bad. And when I hit escape, it's not actually letting me advance. So maybe what I'll do is I'll stop my screen share for just a second. Maybe there's some issue that I could figure out without sharing my screen. Okay, I'm gonna try again and see if this works, but let me know if I need to just stop. I totally understand because I want to respect everybody else's time. There's some images of the camp after it was raided. So we had an exhibition at Fortune Gallery. The day, again, August 9th, happened to be the day that it opened, which was also the day that the HQ camp was raided. And some of the artwork from that I can just look at really quick. There's, the artists made some incredible work that allowed space for, people to process their emotions about what happened at Fairy Creek, as well as comment on what was happening out there. This is a wooden metronome set to the rate of trees felled in BC by Paul Wald. A couple of artists that were part of that exhibition, they weren't part of the residency, but they came out and were part of the exhibition. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going way over, so maybe I'll just quickly go through these, or I could sort of end it there. This is our second exhibition. The names in purple are the new artists that participated. And just maybe to share some insights about how the conversation evolved within the residency and within the exhibitions, looking at kind of the parallels between art and ecology, art and activism, art and kind of journalism. Some of the artists actually did become photographers and journalists during that time, and it was also a way for them to find material for their paintings. And then the continued First Nations perspective that brought so much to our program. So I'll just quickly go through these last slides. This is a photo of 36-foot photo of the circumference of a tree, one tree. I won't play the animation by Connie. This photo documented some of the harsh realities of the blockades. RCMP having a cup of coffee. And the thin blue line badges that were worn by RCMP, which were a racist symbol, and how that impacted the Indigenous and Indigenous women at the blockades. I won't take up too much more of your time. Maybe I'll just scroll through these images so you can get a glimpse, but come and check out our website, EdenGroveAir.com, and you can see more of the artwork there. Sorry to have taken so long. I should have cut it short, but thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. And those are amazing images.
Yeah.
Your residency program was really, really inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay, our last panel speaker for today is my mom. So I am really happy to introduce my mom, Nancy Turner. She's a distinguished professor emerita from the School of Environmental Studies at the University of Victoria. Hi, Mom. She's an ethnobotanist and has worked with First Nations elders and cultural specialists in northwestern North America for over 50 years, helping to document, retain, and promote their traditional knowledge of plants and environments, including Indigenous food and material and traditional medicines. She's published many, many, many books, and they're great, and I can say that as her daughter, and check her out. And I'll pass it over to you. There you go.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. I'm really proud of you. I just have to put that out there. And I'm going to share my screen and do hopefully a pretty quick overview. I'm so impressed with all of our panel speakers. Each one of them is so inspiring, and what you've shared, the words, and how articulate you are in what you've done is just amazing. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully, is that okay? Can you see it all?
Yeah, looks perfect.
Okay, thanks, Sari. Yeah, so I am here on the traditional unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw Salish Nation of Nanaimo, and on Vancouver Island, the nations whose territories encompass the island are Salish and Nuchanoth, Tididat, and Kwakwakkwak peoples. And I want to raise my hands to all of the Indigenous peoples across the country, including the ones there whose territories encompass the area where you are in Montreal. As I said, I really enjoyed the presentations of all of our panel, and want to thank Leila and Santiago, Jorge, and others for facilitating this. And I also want to raise my hands to all the people who've been my teachers over the many years since I've been working in the area of learning about plants, and starting in the late 60s. And these are just some of them, some of the people who are knowledge holders. Many of them have passed away now, but I will share some of their words with you, and they're always with me and always guiding the work that I do. And I just want to say how much I love and appreciate them. I started out as a little kid. My father and my grandfather were entomologists, and we lived in Montana in my very early years. So I started out living in amongst forest in Ponderosa Pine, aspen country. And my older sister and I spent a lot of time out in the forest, and we knew all of the plants. I can still remember them all, even though I was only 5 when we all moved to Victoria, where I was raised and have lived for most of my life. So I grew up with forests in a naturalist family. I was a member of the junior naturalist group in Victoria, and spent a lot of time hiking around the area of southern Vancouver Island and elsewhere, and developed a love of plants, as I say, very early, and became a student of natural history. And when I learned about this subject called ethnobotany, I knew that's what I wanted to study, and started doing that when I was in university. And so I've appreciated right from the start how important these beautiful forests of the world are to all of us, to our health, how they integrate so many different species, how they're such complex and diverse systems, and how important they are for our human well-being, and how connected we are with all of them, even though many people don't seem to realize that connection. And here are just a few more images show the human forest interactions in a way, how we people are part of forests throughout the world in many places. And we've lived with forests. And up here on Haida Gwaii in the top corner is a photo from an instance or what used to be called Anthony Island, Skidans, where there's a stump of a cedar tree. The cedar would have been used for a canoe or for house posts, but the stump is serving as an orchard base for salal and other berry plants. So people worked with the forest to develop orchards and other sources of the resources that they needed. Of course, we all know this. All of you here know how important forests are as a source of oxygen production, carbon sequestration, and of course water, as we've been already hearing about. They're so important for climate control and for mitigating the loss of biodiversity. They're also, from an emotional standpoint, they're a source of inspiration and spiritual energy. They connect us to our past history. They give us joy and they give us vision, and all the species that we relate to within the forest are part of that. For my Indigenous teachers and knowledge holders, forests have been an incredible source of not just material knowledge, but also spiritual knowledge. Language, stories, narratives have shaped people's cultures and economies, values and beliefs. And we've heard about those to some extent with Elder Bill's talk this morning, and with Rainbow Eyes as well. How they're so integral in so many different ways. And just one example is the yew tree here that Bill's relative, the late John Thomas Cleashall, is holding a digging stick made out of yew wood, which is a very tough wood of old growth forests, as many of you would know, used to make all kinds of implements like bows and wedges and mallets. An incredibly important tree, slow growing, and as we know now, the source of a very important cancer drug, Taxol, which was almost the undoing of the yew tree, because people started raiding yew trees from all over the place to get as a source of Taxol until they were able to artificially produce Taxol. And just to show you how important all of these species are in languages and Indigenous languages, here are just some of the names for Pacific yew in the different Indigenous languages in Northwestern North America. And you can see some of them mean bow, some of them mean wedge plant, and other meanings. But you can see from the color coding that these terms have been shared across languages as well. Forests provide us virtually with everything that we need, as well as oxygen, with food, materials, medicines, in all kinds of diverse ways over the entire course of the year. These different resources are available for people to use and have sustained people for thousands of years. Just as an example, licorice fern. Sorry. I have my little granddog down here who's barking, trying to eat my yew wood bowl down there. Lying wall, for example, the licorice fern, seep in another language, source of medicine, source of sweetener for medicine. And salal, everybody knows salal. It's one of the keystone species of the coastal rainforest and a source of healthy food for many people, as well as for flavoring and other purposes, medicine and so forth. Red alder, a medicine, a source of dye, all of those things. And we know that these relationships with first peoples go back for thousands and thousands of years. Here's just one example of an ancient piece of basket made from cedar that was found up in the Olympic Mountains, melting out of a snowbank some years ago. And these two women are the mother and sister of Alice Paul, who I had the privilege of working with up at Heshquit. And the relationships with plants are reflected in many ways in the stories and the ceremonies, the dances, the songs, the teachings. For example, in the Heshquit Nation, Alice Paul told a story of the three yellow cedar sisters who were transformed themselves into yellow cedar after they were scared by raven imitating an owl. they ran up halfway up the mountainside, and they got tired, and they decided to stop and turn themselves into yellow cedars. And that's why today yellow cedars have such beautiful bark, and they have lovely drooping branches, and they made themselves available to people for their use and enjoyment over time. And here we have a painting by Gitska Gitkinjoas of the Devil's Club as a man, as a person. There's stories about those things. Sorry. And we have from Franz Boas's work, going way back, the recognition of cedar as a spiritual being. For example, in these words of praise that he said was a prayer, but Daisy Seward Smith Mayne said it actually means words of praise to a cedar tree. When you go to harvest the bark, you don't just take it. You talk to the tree and you ask for its help, and you recognize it and hold your hands up to it, tell you why you need it, whether it's for a canoe or whether it's for bark or whatever. And Daisy kindly taught me about her family's history of Tsakwame, her ancestor who holed up in a large old-growth cedar tree during the Great Flood, and how when he came out, when he entered the cedar tree, his name was Hawukwalal, but after he came out, it was Tsakwame, which means the first person to perform the sacred cedar bark ceremony. And there's a whole philosophy that people work with perennial species, including the trees, to keep them living. You don't kill them unless you absolutely have to, and then you do it in a very respectful and careful ways. So we have here, from Franz Boas, when a young cedar tree is smooth, they don't take all the cedar bark. For the people said if they should peel off all the cedar bark, the young cedar would die, and another tree nearby would curse the person who did it. Well, that's pretty harsh, but that's the way people practice cedar harvesting to this day, and you can see it in the culturally modified trees that we find up and down the coast. Some of them hundreds of years old that have had pieces of cedar bark taken from them. So partial harvesting is a way that people can use perennial species like trees and shrubs and even herbaceous species without killing them. And you see it all the time, again, in the culturally modified trees. The alder, where a patch of bark up in the Kitlope would have been taken for medicine. Here, a pitch tree of Sitka spruce, and here, Mabalus fir Sioux, where inner bark for eating had been taken from the tree up beyond Hartley Bay in the Gitga'at territory. Contrast that with the utilitarian view that comes from the forests of British Columbia in 1918, that untilled fields, buried minerals, or standing forests are of no value except for the wealth which through industry can be produced therefrom. And that's what we see even extending out today. So my Indigenous friends and other conservation-minded people have been worried about what's happening in the forests for a long time. Chief Earl McQuina George from Ahousaht and his wife Josephine were part of the original protests and blockades of McMillan Blodell when they wanted to log Mears Island. And then you've already heard about what's happened in the Carmanah and the Walbran and Clayoquot Sound. Thanks to Sarah and all of you. And what was happening in Clayoquot Sound also started more protests and the development of the Clayoquot Scientific Panel, of which I was privileged to be a member, co-chaired by Umik Richard Atleo. And there's my friend Chris Pilu, ecologist, standing on the trunk of the cut trunk of one of those giant cedar trees, it just breaks your heart. And to see the damage that the clear-cut logging has done on those steep slopes of the mountains. So the Clayoquot panel made some, I think, some really good recommendations, but unfortunately, the recommendations were not accepted for other parts of British Columbia, but only to be in place in Clayoquot Sound itself. But Richard Atleo, the leader, along with a whole panel of scientists and 4 Indigenous peoples, this is his view. Hishukisawa, everything is one. The Creator made all things one. All things are related and interconnected, therefore sacred and to be respected. And all of these forests, these species, therefore should be respected and have value. But we have companies like Mosaic actually putting out herbicide to kill alder, a sacred tree, arbutus, willow, and other species to poison them. It just doesn't make sense to me. And here's David Suzuki's words. Humans have become a dominant factor, altering the physical, chemical, and biological properties of the planet on a geological scale. And it's an intergenerational crime to trash these priceless treasures for short-term economic and political benefits. So that's the question. What can we humans do for forests, not what can forests do for us? And this is what we owe the forests: respect, care, gratitude, and reciprocity. And I raised my hands to those who made it to the legislative buildings in Victoria that was already mentioned. Tleko, Hawa, Gelakasla. Thanks to all of you for the work that you're doing. So that's thank you. And I hope I didn't go on too long and left enough time for questions and discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much thanks, Mom, and thanks so much to all the presenters. And if all the presenters could turn on their cameras now, then we can see you all here. And I think I'll just open the floor for questions. We do have a little bit of time for questions till 3 o'clock. So I'm sure someone has a question. There's someone at the back there.
Hi, I have a question for Rainbow. So you were talking about bringing natural laws on top of colonial laws. Can you explain a little bit more your work that you have been doing in order to bridge that gap?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's at the core of what we're doing. And so I think we're just learning how to do it because it's never been done before. We're really at a really special place. And I think it came from the call of the forest. And like, it's just even figuring out what are natural laws, what are Indigenous laws. And it comes from our elders like Elder Bill Jones and Grandma Losa. And it comes from meeting the people like we met at COP15 when we brought the 750-year-old Douglas fir, and people felt it. A lot of delegates and environmental ministers from all over the world went up to the cookie, the round, and felt it and cried. And I feel like the cookie is vibrating and pulsing our natural laws. It's something that we feel. And it's bringing people together. And so I'm on the shadow cabinet of the Green Party. And so before I joined the Green Party, I really didn't even know what a shadow cabinet was. I followed Elder Bill and I followed Grandma Losa, and I met Amita Kuttner, who was the interim leader of the Green Party at the time. And that's how I became deputy leader, Uma Anis. And I love it that I can say I would never have gone into politics, but I followed my elders to Green Party rallies. And this is how I got involved with the Green Party. And so now I'm in a place and environment where I don't fit in, but I don't think Indigenous people are supposed to fit in. There's this pressure that we have to fit into the colonial system that I felt it my whole life. I was always uncomfortable in school. I was always a loner. And then I really never felt community until I went to Fairy Creek. But I think this is what we're doing. We're not supposed to fit in. And I think this is a big lesson. We're not supposed to fit into this system. We're supposed to change it. And so on the shadow cabinet of the Green Party, we can introduce new policies to be brought to the Green Party membership to be approved, and then it will go to caucus in the parliament. And so this is what we're doing. And I'm talking with IPAC, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle of the Green Party, and we're gonna bring forward, hopefully, a legislation for the next 7 generations. And it has to come from the people, because like we learned at Fairy Creek, chief and councils don't always work for the people and Mother Earth. It's being talked about now that the chiefs, Roy Vickers says this in Rematriation, the chiefs can be mayors. They don't represent the culture. They represent the colonial system. So we're breaking through many barriers right now, and we're gaining awareness of the reality of the situation that we're in. And there's so many roadblocks and like curves, so we really have to flow like water to really figure out how to do this, what nobody's ever done before. But we're figuring it out. We're following our hearts, our nutsama, as what Grandma Losa would say, our nutsama. We follow our heart. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's questions also from those online, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can open up your camera and your mic and ask. Does anyone here have a question? Jim? Yeah.
Thank you all for your presentations. Several of you talked about the experiences in protecting the forest, but it seems like the community you created was just as important. Is that the message for us sitting in downtown Montreal in this heavily, artificial landscape, or how do you take those specific ideas to the rest of Canada, if you wanted to, I guess?
Yeah, I can take that one on. Community was so important, and what I witnessed up at Fairy Creek was that we found people came to the mountain and found themselves. They found that they could be who they needed to be, and they found a community that accepted them for who they were. And I think that was really revealing to a lot of people that they could be themselves and be accepted for that. And I think that's the first time that happened for a lot of people. And I think the other thing was that a lot of young people particularly came up to the mountain and found a purpose in life. And that was incredibly significant for them. I know several of them who went back, to their daily lives, and they quit their jobs, they delayed their education, and they came back up on the mountain to stay. because this was their community and where they needed to be. And we were able to support that, through donations of food and cash and our online GoFundMe. We were able to sustain that, through the elders from Oak Bay who came up the mountain bearing goodies and hugs, so it was really a coming together of so many cultures and people who had never been allies before. And I think a lot of lessons can be learned from that and applied across the country. But I think it has to be something organic, has to be something authentic and heartfelt, and something that people really believe in and can be a part of. Thank you.
I might add a word to that as well. Here in Vancouver, there's over 50 buried streams in the city, like underground. There are a lot of waterways that have been piped and paved over. And one of the projects in my neighborhood has been to try to reconnect with the water underground and to create rain gardens, ways of slowing down the water, greening the great infrastructure, all of that. So I do think like the city is not a write-off. There's an ecology going on in the city that needs to be healed as well. Like the healing needs to happen all over the place, like in different places and in different ways. For me, following the water has been a good way to connect with other people who are thinking about that or looking for that. It's also taken me to Fairy Creek, but I think the interconnectedness that Rainbow Eyes and others have been talking about and Nancy and so forth is really important, so that what we think about here also makes us more resilient to connect and support people in other places as well, hopefully through that sense of making connections and community building.
I'll add really quick also. After Panda, Rita was Panda also. I'll say that was her camp name. She was great. What we found at Fairy Creek, because everybody would ask, we can't come to Fairy Creek. We were not able to. We always felt so grateful that we were able to go to Fairy Creek, that our lives had opened up for it. And people always ask, what can we do to help because we can't go? And what we figured out is the biggest thing that we can do to touch people's hearts is art, music, pictures, documentaries. We find our way through our hearts, but to touch the most hearts as possible, it's through art, music, documentaries, or creative avenues, writing, and then you share it with your community.
Thank you.
I could say one tiny other little addition to that is that I like the idea that hope is a verb. And so it's by doing, like in the act of doing, that you find the hope and you find the community. And that is so energizing and just keeps you going when you know that even if you have like one or two friends that will show up and go to a march or, want to talk about the issues that are important to you. And doesn't even have to be, environmental issues, but like there's front lines everywhere, right? There's issues that matter everywhere. And to just find those people that that you can do those activities with, and then it just grows from there.
And we're almost out of time. Mom, would you like to say a quick response, and then maybe we'll give it to Elder Bill to have the last word?
Oh, okay. I can only add to what everyone has been saying so far, that there is so much that anyone can do. We all have our own strengths and our own talents, you could say. And the best thing is to recognize what we can do best and how we can contribute. And if we think of the diversity of people and approaches and interests, and we put them all together, then we have the strongest possible way forward. And that's about all I can say. And I'm really happy to give Elder Bill the last word. Thank you.
It's rather embarrassing to be gifted with such a flattering honor, Nancy. You are a kingpin of our eco study. You have been a student. I knew you or met you when you knew my grandmother, Ada and Ida. So I really am so worshiping you almost, and, along with my all my great friends. It's so I met so many people that made me feel life is worthwhile. And it's so flattering to me to realize that when I was preaching sensitivity at Fairy Creek, when I said that we have been desensitized by civilization, and now by our excursion and living up Fairy Creek, we can resensitize ourselves to our natural being. And I think that's what happened. And one boy said to me, he was a young man, he said, "And oh, you mean we all are indigenous and that we're re-indigenizing us ourselves and this world?" And I have to agree with him. We have to echo and listen to those echoes of our past. My grandfather said to me once, he says, when you finally realize what our great mother wants you to do, you don't know it. He said, you will leave the forest and you will just to do and think what our great mother wants you to do. And I think that's what the colonial economic system, actually, I think it started longer, way long time ago, I think, probably about Alexandrian's time, when carpetbaggers followed Alexander's armies. And that was where carpetbaggers were first invented, I think, in my mind. So you conquer the world and then you, oh boy, utilize it. And then you discard people. And I think that is what our civilization has done, in that we have not let ourselves be human in our own worldly needs, economic needs. So without getting too preachy, I think we are now with the elder students like Nancy, my friend, and all of you here are really sort of helping me realize that life is really worth it. And that even though the world now seems to appear to me be as old as Bill, figuratively, and that it's on the end game. Well, if it is, we're going to help it be at peace and help it resensitize itself to our gentleness of our great mother. Tlako, tlako. Hishu. That means see you.
Thank you, Elder Bill. Rainbow Eyes just had one more quick word, I think, to add.
Yeah, really quickly. I just wanted to add the importance of something that Grandma Losa says and Elder Bill as well, and something that we're spreading with rematriation everywhere we go to the cities and towns and communities, that we are the Rainbow Nation. This is so important right now to realize that we truly are one nation. We're connecting the borders, and that's something that we felt at Fairy Creek, that we are the Rainbow Nation, that we're building it. And we're not just building it, we're joining it, because it has been building for a long time. And that's what we learned at COP15, that we are internationally, we are becoming the Rainbow Nation. And I just wanted to share a quote from Elder Bill.
Okay. Thanks.
As well, this is a quote that Elder Bill said at the rally that we had at the Old Growth in Victoria last week, where there was thousands of people that came for the Old Growth. So Elder Bell, I don't know if you remember saying this, but I wrote it down because it's so, so beautiful. So this is what he said. I had an odd thought that came to me. It starts off, you can't see the trees for the forest, and then you can't see the forest for the trees. And I realized that we can't see ourselves for the people until we see ourselves and we see us all. And then we become that forest, which we are. So, wise words from Elder Bell. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, Gila Kesla, Sarah.
Thank you so, so much to all of you for being here on Zoom, and to the folks in the fourth space for hosting, and all of you for coming in person and online. And special thanks to Leela Sujer for being the kind of center pin around which these conversations have been whirling, and Santiago for all your work, and Rebecca for all your organizational work. Thank you, everyone.
Issue.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to close up the online space now. Thanks so much for joining us. And we hope until next time. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Take good care.
2.